Well, hi everyone. I'm Noah, and I go to school here in Telluride. And like I said, I went to the University of Houston in the Baldelli lab. And so the Baldelli lab specializes in physical chemistry, which is just a mix of physics and chemistry, which is kind of one of my big interests. So we were in the building, the Science and Engineering Research Center, which is this blue building right there. And I was there with 3 other high school interns, and the rest were wonderful grad students who are very helpful. So most of my work was done creating thin films of copper on silicon wafers, and that was done with a thermal evaporator, and I made like over 20 different ones, as you can see in that far right over there, and took images of them. Here's an image which looks cool, but it was kind of a bad sample, which is why it looks with like the craters the way it does. And so the process of creating the films was I'd start with a chip off of the wafer of silicon, and then I'd wash it and clean it to make sure that it was like almost as perfectly smooth as possible. I place it into the thermal evaporator, which I think you could kind of think of it like a vacuum oven almost. And so I turn that on, and the heat actually evaporates the copper, which I feel like most people don't think of metals evaporating, but they can. And so that evaporated copper then deposits onto the silicon, creating the film. And that process would generally take like a few hours, so I did usually one a day. It was mostly because getting the vacuum down to the pressure took so long, but it was still really fun to do. And then other work I did was I worked on this 4-point probe, which is a way to measure the conductivity of like thin films of metals, which this is needed because other measurements are less accurate due to like how thin they are, because they're only like a few nanometers thick sometimes. And funny story is that this thing like kind of blew up, and so I had to rewire the entire machine myself, which I actually had a lot of fun doing. Got to solder everything into place. The pins kind of were annoying because they wouldn't stick with the glue I was using, but eventually I got it working, so it was really fun. And then I also got to work with a little bit of lasers, which the Baldelli lab has a few lasers, which they use for spectroscopy, which is really cool. Mine was to measure the roughness of the films that I created, and it didn't really work because like my setup was kind of janky, but I had fun making it. And it also took me like a week to try and figure out how to get the photodiode to like give off a signal that I could read, but it's fun still. And then also at the University of Houston, I got to present a poster on everything I'd done over the 5 weeks I was there, and it was a really great experience to be able to talk with other people that were there. And then outside of the lab, I was working at a dorm, or I was living at a dorm on campus, which is kind of unique to mine. We were at Colin Oaks, and it was like a kind of a 15-minute walk to the lab every day, which I kind of enjoyed, except it was a little hot sometimes, but you know, I liked it. And then I also went to the rec center a lot. I would go swimming, climbing, work out. It was really great, and a really fun time to buy my time after the lab. And then I went to watch the 4th of July fireworks at Herman Park, which was really cool. I went with the rest of the people there, and a cool fact was I was with the Welch group, which is a group of students from Texas who were also having internships at the University of Houston. And also in the far right over there is some of the great food in Houston. Houston has just really good food. I also went to museums when I was in Houston. I really like museums, so I went to the Museum of Illusions with my sister and my stepdad when they were there. And then I also went to the Museum of Natural Sciences, and I really liked the gems exhibit. They have like a vault full of like fancy gems and jewelry and stuff, and I thought it was really cool. And then some tips for future interns is to just do your best and try and learn the most you can. You should get comfortable with failure. I failed a lot. Especially like my laser setup, like I mentioned. You should have fun, and then don't drop a wrench in the vacuum, which I did, and it wasn't as serious as it sounds, but it definitely gave me a headache, and it took a few hours to get it out, so. And thank you to all these wonderful people.